Welcome back to another episode of BreBre Talks MMA. Dricus Du Plessis is the new middleweight champion of the world in a controversial decision win at UFC 297. And I must say, I thought Sean won the fight. Please don't come after me. I don't think it was a robbery. I think robbery is a little bit of an overused term in MMA. But I do think that Sean won the fight. And I went back and watched it again. And I watched it in slow motion with the sound off. And when I watched it again, I actually thought even more that Sean won the fight. I had thought that round 3 was a clear win for Dricus when I watched it the first time. But watching it back the second time, round 3 was a little bit more in favor of Sean than I thought. So I gave that round to Dricus. I had actually had it 1, 2, and 5 for Sean on first glance, like first watching the fight. But when I went back and watched it again, definitely Sean won the first round. I thought he won the second round pretty clearly. The third round I thought was close, but I thought Sean could have got the third round as well. The fourth round, definitely I gave that one to Dricus. Round 5, I gave that one to Sean. The thing is, like, the second round, I think a lot of people are giving a little too much weight to that takedown that Dricus got. Like I said, I watched it in slow motion. Most people, when they're watching the fights, they're talking to their friends or drinking, whatever. Even the people that are saying Sean won, a lot of them were probably drunk. So let's be real. Very few people watch the fight sober. I am one of those people, so I will give you my thoughts. I noticed that Sean blocked a pretty huge majority of Dricus' shots. So Dricus was landing on Sean's arm, his hand, a lot of times on his shoulder, so he wasn't really connecting. And that's another thing that's kind of tricky to see when you're watching a really good boxer in MMA. Because Sean is probably one of the better boxers we've ever seen in the sport. And it's not just because of his jab. It's not just because of, the way that he fights. It's also because of his defense. And in boxing, you don't want to completely get out of the way, from a punch. You want to just small movements. So, when Sean is slipping punches, sometimes it looks like Dricus is connecting, but it's actually Sean is slipping the punch. So it might graze Sean a little bit, but Sean has such good boxing defense that I think that it was very hard to tell that Sean was blocking and defending a lot of those shots. So I think that's why it looked like Dricus won the second round, just because the optics of it, it looked like Dricus was throwing more, and he probably was throwing more, but I think Sean was much more accurate. I thought it was pretty obvious that Sean won the second round. Dricus didn't really do anything with the takedown in that round. Now, he did later in the fight get a little bit more control time. But in the second round, he really didn't. I mean, Sean got right back up. I don't think that trumps everything that Sean did in that round. Because if you look at Dricus, look at his face in the first round. His nose was busted a little bit. And I can't remember which eye, but one of his eyes was starting to get a little swollen. And then in the second round, both eyes were swollen. So Sean did much more damage in that round. And I know he had a little cut in the second round. It didn't look like it was really that big of a deal. I mean, it was a little cut, which that can happen. You hit somebody in the right spot. Sean was saying it was a headbutt, I think. It's kind of hard to tell. I didn't really know if there was a headbutt there or not. It could have been one of the overhands that Dricus threw, or there was an elbow later in the fight, I think, that caused the bigger cut. So I don't know which cut Sean was talking about. So there was a small cut later in the round on Sean, but ultimately the compounding damage that Sean did just from his jab alone was far more than anything that Dricus did in the first 2 rounds, in my opinion. I thought that, because if you look at Dricus's face, that kind of damage doesn't come from one punch. That damage comes from landing multiple shots clean. You can land one punch and cut somebody open. You can land one elbow and cut somebody open. But the damage that Sean did, that comes from landing continuously and continuously. So the type of damage that was done on both fighters, Sean's damage was much more compounding damage, and Dricus had like a few times where he cut Sean open. So I think that's the difference to me that I noticed. Now, of course, nobody is going to agree on this. Everybody's going to be up in arms. And at the end of the day, we can't go back and change it. So it really doesn't matter what we think, who we think won. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like Sean's going to get the rematch. It looks like they're already trying to market the Izzy fight. I saw the UFC posted the Izzy and Dricus trash talk. So it looks like they're already trying to make that happen, which I think is a little disrespectful to Sean considering how close the fight was and considering that arguably Sean did win the fight. And this wasn't like the Volkanovski-Islam situation, because the first Volkanovski-Islam fight, I actually thought that Islam did win that fight. I agreed with the score on that. But the difference there is Islam had over 7 minutes of control time in that fight. In this fight, Dricus couldn't keep Sean on the ground really for that long. I've seen some comments spamming jabs. That to me is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. If you say that, please stop talking about MMA. Like, what is that? This is not a video game. This is a fight. There's no spamming jabs. It's called landing clean punches. If you throw a jab and it's landing every single time, you're probably going to keep throwing it because it's landing, it's working, it's doing what it's supposed to do. A jab is one of the most effective strikes that you can throw if you know how to do it right. And with the proper technique, a jab can do just as much damage as any other punch. So I don't know what the whole thing is with people saying that Sean was only throwing jabs. His jab is one of his most effective weapons. So of course he's going to throw it. I don't understand why a jab would count any less than any other strike. I mean, I've seen people get knocked out with a jab. Usman knocked out Gilbert Burns with a jab. I think the reason that people are kind of discrediting Sean's performance and saying he's only throwing jabs and all this stuff, I think the reason they're saying that is because we really don't see fighters in MMA with a jab that good very often. We don't see fighters really do damage with a jab that often like Sean has done. I feel like there's a lot of good BJJ practitioners, there's a lot of good kickboxers, a lot of good wrestlers, but there's very few fighters out there that have really good boxing. And Sean is one of them. Sean has probably one of the most effective jabs I've ever seen in MMA. Come on, guys. Come on. A jab is a significant strike. If you use the right technique, it can be very effective. So I think that is a very silly thing that people have been saying. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to sit here and say it was a robbery and go on a whole campaign about how Sean Strickland's decision should be overturned and all this stuff, because let's be real, none of that is, like, these bad decisions have been going on for a long time, and I do think that the judges made the wrong decision, and I wasn't super mad about it at first, and then when it really sunk in, I was like, wait a minute, I was like, Dricus didn't win this fight, like, are you kidding me? Like, and then when I watched it again, I was like, no, like, he didn't win the fight. It's just, I don't know. But that's my opinion. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion, of course. I have friends of mine that thought Dricus won, and that's fine, you know? I'm not going to argue with people about it, really. I'm just going to give my opinion. So I thought Sean won. I think there is a lack of consistency in the judging, though. In the grand scheme of things, that's the big concern, is where is the consistency in the judging? The person who is probably most disappointed that Sean lost isn't me. It's my mom. My mom was heartbroken when they read Dricus Du Plessis. And as soon as it went to split decision, I knew it was going to happen. I'm like, oh, they're going to give it to Dricus for sure. I just don't think that getting takedowns is enough to win you a whole fight, you know? And look at the damage difference in the second round. And I had some people trying to say that the damage was all done in the first round. No. There was damage done in the first round and in the second round on Dricus. The first round, his nose was messed up, that happens. If you get jabbed over and over again to the nose, like, it freaking hurts. It hurts, and it does damage. It'll swell up, and especially on, like, his face, you could see, like, his forehead was swollen a little bit. You could see his eye was starting to swell up in the first round, and then the other eye in the second round. So, like, his eye was almost swollen shut in the second round. I expected Dricus to come out crazy aggressive in the first couple rounds, and he really didn't. I thought it was interesting that Sean kind of made him fight at his pace, and because it's a 5-round fight. So with him having struggles with cardio in the past. But I thought that his cardio looked much better. So that is one question that it did answer, is that Dricus does have 5-round cardio. However, he didn't really wrestle that much. So I'm curious if he would have tried to control Sean more, if he would have gassed himself out. And maybe that's why, he just landed the takedown and didn't really try as hard to keep Sean on the ground. Or maybe Sean's just really good at getting back up. I don't know. But that could be an energy management kind of thing. Maybe he was just trying to be a little bit more conservative in this fight. A title's on the line. I get it. And we see that sometimes with these title fights. They're fighting for a title, so they don't want to take as many risks. The only thing that actually did surprise me about Sean, though, is, first of all, how easily he was taken down, but then he was able to get right back up. So it was kind of like, how do you really count that? But also with Sean, I was surprised that he wasn't the one pressuring. He was kind of dictating the pace, but he was not the one pressuring. Dricus was definitely more of the aggressor in the fight, but he wasn't really landing. That's the thing. He wasn't landing a ton of the shots that he was throwing at Sean. I thought it was a great fight. I thought it was fun. I didn't think it was a war like they said it was going to be. I mean, it was a good fight. It was a competitive, very competitive fight, but it wasn't a war. It was more of a chess match than a war, to be honest. So, I don't know. I wasn't overly blown away with either of their performances. I would have been fine with it being a draw, honestly. But the thing is, in MMA, you don't really see draws that much unless a point is taken or there's a 10-8 round, and they don't really do 10-10 rounds in MMA, so it's kind of hard for there to be a draw. Do you think Sean deserves a rematch? I think he does. I thought Izzy deserved a rematch too, and that fight wasn't close at all. Now, do I think Izzy deserves a title shot against Dricus? Not really. I think you can make a case for it just because Izzy was such a dominant champion. Like, he was champion for so long. But I don't know that he deserves it more than Strickland necessarily, just because it was such a close fight, and arguably Sean won the fight in most people's eyes. I mean, Dana White even thought that Sean won. So for that reason, I do think that Sean deserves a rematch. I doubt that he's going to get one, because they didn't even really want him fighting for the title in the first place. Let's be real. I mean, what was he ranked? Number 9 when he fought for the title, I think, the first time when he fought at Adesanya. So, and nobody thought he was going to win. So I don't think that he's going to, I don't think he's going to get a rematch, unfortunately. And this was what I was afraid of, because Sean's style, he's not a knockout artist, I mean, he finished Abus, but Dricus is on a higher level than Abus, let's be real. So he's not a knockout artist, and especially in a title fight, I did not expect there to be really much of a chance that Sean would finish Dricus at all. I was expecting it 100% to go to decision, and this is what I was afraid of. I was afraid just because I know his style, and I figured it would probably be a controversial decision. So here we are. Here we are. But robbery, probably a little bit of a stretch. I don't think it was a robbery. I think it was a close fight. It was a competitive fight. I do think Sean won, but onward. So what's next for Dricus? It looks like they're trying to set up the Adesanya fight. I think that's kind of what they wanted in the first place, for the whole UFC Africa marketing and all that. I don't know if I want to see that fight, really. Like, it sounds like a good idea, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to be that exciting of a fight. I think that Dricus versus Khamzat, or Dricus versus the winner of Costa Whitaker, if Costa wins, I think that would be a better fight. And I know Izzy deserves it more, obviously. Like, Khamzat does not deserve a title fight, and really, Paulo Costa does not deserve a title fight either. But matchup-wise, stylistically, I think those are probably better matchups. But another one, this is a sleeper. This is one nobody's really talking about. Vettori versus Allen is coming up. I think the winner of that fight should fight Dricus. 100%. The winner of that will fight for the title in the fall, I would think, or late summer. I would hope. Depending on who has the belt. If Dricus still has the belt at that point, you definitely should put the winner of Vettori Allen, especially if Brendan Allen wins. If Brendan Allen beats Marvin Vettori and he doesn't get a title shot, that's insane. Another middleweight fight that I'm really excited about is Hermansson versus Pfeiffer. If I had to guess, I would say probably Joe Pfeiffer wins that fight. I don't know. I just have a feeling about him. But we'll see. Jack Hermansson's tough. I mean, he's not an easy fight by any means. But Vettori versus Allen, that is going to make a huge difference in the middleweight division. If Brendan Allen wins, we shall see. But at the end of the day, I think probably the only two people that deserve a title fight at middleweight right now are Sean Strickland rematch or Adesanya versus Dricus. I'm not mad at the Adesanya fight. I do think that that might be a mistake, though, for the UFC to focus more on the Adesanya fight than Strickland, because I think Strickland is a bigger star in the UFC than Adesanya right now. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but I don't know. I think that might be true. I think Strickland has created a huge name for himself very quickly, and I think that the UFC should kind of run with it. But at the same time, you know, he does say some controversial things, and that might have something to do with why they're not wanting to push him as much as they want to push Adesanya. Although Adesanya, you know, has some questionable... I'm not even going to bring it up. Don't even get me started with this. Don't even get me started with the dog thing. But I don't know. I used to be a huge Adesanya fan, and I still am. I still love Adesanya. I have an Adesanya t-shirt. But once I found out about that, I was just like, oh. Like, I don't know. It kind of ruined my opinion about Adesanya. I was like, yeah, I don't like that. That's a little much for me. But moving on, let's do a recap real quick of the other fights. Women's bantamweight title fight, probably one of the more underwhelming title fights I've ever seen. And I'm not trying to be mean. I'm a very positive person. Like, especially when I talk about MMA. You guys should know by now, I'm a very positive person. I like to build people up. I like to focus on the good things. But on this pay-per-view card, not going to lie, this was probably one of the, I don't want to say one of the worst pay-per-view cards, but I thought the prelims were better than the main card. The prelims was bangers, honestly. Like, the first fight, what was the first fight of the night? Jimmy Flick versus Malcolm Gordon. I told you guys, Jimmy Flick. For him to snap a 2-fight losing streak and get back in the win column and do so in front of his opponent's home country, that's freaking awesome. That was a great fight, too. Very fast-paced grappling, which I love to see. And then after that was probably one of the worst beatdowns I've ever seen in my life. Jasmine Jasudavicius absolutely dominated Priscilla Cachoeira. Yeah, that was rough. Gabriel Gonzalez reminded me, though, that Valentina did a very similar thing, if not worse, beatdown on Priscilla Cachoeira. But that's Valentina. So this is on the early prelims, you know. This is a little different. So, yeah. Jasmine, she's scary. And I kind of had a feeling she would win, but Jesus. I mean, the strike count... I think Jasmine landed over 300 strikes, and Priscilla landed like 20-something. So, not competitive at all. Not competitive at all. And then Jasmine ended up getting a submission. Thank God. And we didn't have to watch any more of that absolute beatdown. Then there was a welterweight fight, Sam Patterson versus Johan Lainez. Sam Patterson pretty much made it look easy. Submitted Johan very quickly. None of the Canadian men won any fights on this card. Pretty sad day for Canada, honestly. But Jillian Robertson. Jillian and Jasmine saved the day for Canada. They both brought home wins. Jillian actually ended up getting a TKO, which was kind of surprising. I thought she was going to get a submission, but I'll take a TKO as well. I love it. I just thought that was one of her more dominant performances, where I never had a moment watching that fight where I thought she was going to lose. As soon as the fight started, she looked like she was very much in her groove. She looked very confident. She looked fantastic, honestly. Beautiful performance from Jillian Robertson. Not only is her grappling next level, and it's not just her submission game, it's also her transitions. Also, her ground and pound is underrated. So I was really, really impressed with that one. And then a bantamweight fight, Sergey City versus Ramon Tavares. This was probably fight of the night, in my opinion. I know they gave the main event fight of the night, but I thought this was fight of the night. Ramon Tavares ended up winning via split decision. I thought that fight could have gone either way. I was expecting them to give it to City, but they didn't. But I don't know. It was a close fight. It was a good fight. So, and then we had Charles Jourdain versus Sean Woodson. Sean Woodson won via split decision. Honestly, I was expecting this to be a unanimous decision. The scorecards were all over the place, very inconsistent. One judge even scored the first round for Charles Jourdain, which makes zero sense. I thought Sean Woodson absolutely won rounds 1 and 2, clear as day. Round 3 was close. I don't know who won that round. You could give it to either one. I don't know. It was just confusing. It was very confusing. So not only did one of the judges score it for Charles, but also the ref raised the wrong hand when they announced the winner. So they said Sean Woodson, like Bruce Buffer said Sean Woodson, and they raised Charles Jourdain's hand. And I was like, what is going on here? I was like, there's no way Charles Jourdain won this fight. And then they grabbed Sean, and they're like, hey, you won the fight. DC was like, hey, Sean won the fight. It was so weird. I've never seen this happen before. And also, it was shocking to me because I thought there was no way Charles Jourdain won this fight. I'm like, no. In what universe did he win this fight? Absolutely not. He got completely outstruck in the first 2 rounds. And the third round, he did some grappling, and I think you could give him the round for that. But I thought Sean looked fantastic. I thought it was a great performance. I thought he really did a great job using his range and keeping it on the feet, not taking any chances with going to the ground with Charles. And even when he did get taken down in the third round, I thought he did a great job defending that. And yeah, I thought he looked great. I mean, it was a beautiful performance, honestly. He looked smooth. And like I was kind of saying before, it's really hard to read his strikes. And, I think it's just because of his movement, and he moves his hands a lot, and it's kind of hard to see where, what he's going to throw. Yeah, I thought it was very impressive. So I'm excited to see him fight again, honestly. And I think he's going to probably get a big fight next, because Charles Jourdain, that's a tough opponent. Beating him, I think that earns you a big fight. So we'll see. Then we had Brad Katona versus Garrett Armfield. Garrett Armfield won via unanimous decision. I thought it was a close fight. Honestly, I thought the first round was close. I thought the third round was close. I gave Garrett the first and the second round, and I gave Brad the third. So I wasn't surprised that Garrett won, but it was very close. It was a good fight, too. I actually really enjoyed that fight. And then Chris Curtis versus Marc-Andre Barriault. So Chris Curtis won this fight via split decision. Yeah, I mean, I was expecting a unanimous decision for Chris Curtis. I mean, I thought it was close, but I didn't think it was that close. I actually was expecting Chris Curtis to win all the judges. So, like I said, the judging was very inconsistent. And then the next fight. So this was the fight that I really didn't understand the judging. Movsar Evloev versus Arnold Allen. And it wasn't necessarily that I was surprised at the result. I wasn't surprised that Evloev won. What concerned me was the commentary. It seemed like they were already kind of saying that Evloev won the fight before the decision was read. And it wasn't an obvious win for Evloev, in my opinion. I thought it was a very close fight. I'm like, they haven't read the decision yet. I'm like, that was a close fight. What are you talking about? Evloev kind of had a hard time keeping Arnold Allen on the ground. I mean, he took him down a bunch of times. So that definitely helped his case. But, I mean, I thought Arnold Allen looked really good in the stand-up. But at the end of the day, yeah, I guess Evloev won the fight, but I was expecting that fight to be a split decision more so than like the Chris Curtis fight or the Strickland fight, you know. So, yeah, weird judging. Just the whole thing was weird. I don't know. Kind of sus, but that's okay. Welterweight, Neil Magny versus Mike Malott. I thought Mike Malott was going to save Canada. This, honestly, is worst case scenario result in this fight because Mike Malott could be a huge star, especially in Canada, and he was 10-1 going into this. Neil Magny, you know, it's not like he's going to fight for a title or anything, so he's basically a gatekeeper at this point. And he's a really good gatekeeper, but yeah, I mean, he's very good at derailing hype trains. I don't know, that was really disappointing. And Mike Malott was winning the fight and then got ground and pounded. That was kind of depressing, not gonna lie. Sad day for Canada. But yeah, getting back to the women's title fight, I love women's MMA. Both of the other women's fights were fantastic. This fight, I mean, a little underwhelming. I don't know. I just think that division, like, they just don't have a ton of fighters in that division at this point. And I had a feeling that Pennington could win that fight just because she's so much more experienced. 265 total strikes for Raquel Pennington? That's way more than I thought. And then on the Sean Strickland versus Du Plessis fight, 183 strikes versus 140. I need to move on from this. I need to move on. I just want to move on from UFC 297. Thank God. It was a little bit of a disaster, not going to lie. But the prelims were fire. But the main card of UFC 297 was Roman Dolidze versus Nasruddin Imavov. Main event. Oh, it's another middleweight fight. Renato Moicano versus Drew Dober. Co-main event? That's a spicy co-main event. Randy Brown versus Muslim Salikov. Aliaskab Hisriv versus Mahmoud Muradov. I'm so bad at pronouncing these names. Oh my God. When's the next pay-per-view? UFC 298. That's Volkanovski versus Topuria. Ian Gary versus Jeff Neal, the co-main event. I think Ian Gary might win, unfortunately. Why is it so hard to like Ian Gary? I don't know. I've tried so hard to like him. I don't know. Maybe I'll try again. I'll try again to be an Ian Gary fan. I'll try again. You know, it was kind of hard for a while because there was a lot going on, but I'll try again. I'll give him another shot. I feel like he has a lot of haters, so you know what? I'll become an Ian Gary fan now. How about that? Merab Dvalishvili versus Henry Cejudo. That's going to be a freaking amazing fight. Alaskarov versus Anthony Hernandez. Ooh, that's a good fight. That is a good fight. Mackenzie Dern versus Amanda Lemos. Ooh, I don't know. That's a tough fight for Mackenzie Dern. Andrea Lee versus Miranda Maverick. Honestly, though, this card is not that stacked. I'm not gonna lie. It's not as stacked as I thought it was. I thought it was way more stacked than this. I don't know. The Dern fight, that's a good fight. Hernandez versus Aliskarov, that's a good fight. Cejudo versus Merab. Jeff Neal versus Gary. I mean, there's good fights. I guess it'll probably be better than UFC 297, but who knows. What I'm really excited for is UFC 299 and UFC 300. That's what I'm really excited for. Have they announced any more fights for UFC 300? I don't think they have. I'm so excited for every single fight they announce for UFC 300 because I know they're going to have so many more fights announced. So I keep telling people, I'm like, guys, this is just a beginning. Like, they have more they're going to announce, and it's going to get crazier and crazier every single time. Okay. I think we're done here. I think we're done. I don't know what else to talk about, guys. I do not feel good right now. But I wanted to at least talk about the Sean Strickland, Dricus Du Plessis, or I'm sorry, Dricus. I'm trying to pronounce the names better. I'm freaking Joey Diaz over here. I saw, oh, you know what Joey Diaz did call Dricus? He called him Dukas. Diaz so much. I am so glad they brought him on the Fight Companion. Honestly, though, I think I would rather have, like, Brendan Schaub, as much hate as he gets, I actually don't hate him that much. But I think I'd rather have Joe Rogan, Eddie Bravo, Sam Tripoli, Joey Diaz. Sam Tripoli was great on the last Fight Companion. And him with Eddie Bravo and Joey Diaz, that would be crazy. That dynamic would just be insane. They should do it. Bring Tripoli back on Fight Companion, please. Tripoli was great. But anyways, thank you guys for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think about the Strickland fight. Let me know who you think should be next for Dricus. Should he fight Adesanya next? Should he rematch Sean? Should he fight Hamzat? Who should Dricus fight next? I want to know what your thoughts are. Thank you for watching. Sorry I'm sick, but I tried. I will see you guys again next week. Peace out.